Bored in Butler County? Need to know where to catch a show this weekend? What events are even happening in the area? I'm Molly Miller, one of the writers behind the Butler Eagles Weekend Entertainment section, and I'm here to banish the boredom from your cold and rainy days. Sign up and receive Miller Minutes, that's my column, and a list of Butler County-based events direct to your inbox every Thursday afternoon by visiting bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter. That's bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter. You can also find the latest events under the A&E tab at www.butlereagle.com. Click Weekend Entertainment, or pick up Thursday's print edition of the paper for the latest events. See, there's lots to do in Butler County when you read the Butler Eagles Weekend Entertainment section. Visit bit.ly/ButlerEagleWE newsletter to sign up for the weekly newsletter, so you won't be bored in Butler County again.
This episode is brought to you by Butler County District Attorney Richard A. Goldinger, R.W. McDonald & Sons Incorporated, Robert Stevens Jewelers. Hello, and welcome to this season of Alter Ego. We are starting Season 1 with the topic of addiction in Butler County, conversations on the physical side of addiction, trauma, the neuroscience, mental health, and stigma surrounding addiction. Experts, resources, and stories from people who have fought addiction head-on. I am your host, Laura Crago. Let's keep the conversation going. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For a long time, I suffered with depression and anxiety. I had tried therapy before, but struggled finding a therapist I connected with until I found BetterHelp. That's why I am so excited to share BetterHelp's mission to make therapy more affordable and more accessible, because finding a therapist can be hard, especially when you're limited to the options in your area. BetterHelp is a platform that makes finding a therapist easier because it's online. Remote therapy sessions, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to a professional therapist in as little as a few days. It's easy to sign up and get matched with a therapist. Click the link in description and receive 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. And by clicking that link, you support this channel. Plus, you can easily switch to a new therapist at no additional cost without stressing about insurance, who's in your network, or anything like that. I was struggling for a long time, and BetterHelp was where I found my therapist, Whitney, who I still see weekly for almost 2 years now. So, if you're struggling, like I was, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Click the link in description or go to betterhelp.com/altereagle. That's betterhelp.com/altereagle. There's no better time than now to start your mental health journey. Thank you again, BetterHelp, for supporting this channel. Hello, today I'm sitting down with Beau Sneddon, Warden of Butler County Prison, and Matt Clayton, who is our reentry coordinator here in Butler County at the prison as well. So Beau has over 25 years of experience working in corrections. He began his career in 1998 as a part-time correctional officer with the Butler County Prison, promoting to full-time in December of that same year. Furthering his career with a promotion to sergeant in 2003, captain in March of 2013, deputy warden of operations in September of 2014, and his current position as warden in August of 2023. Beau graduated from Indiana University of Pennsylvania Municipal Academy in 2001, I swear, serving as a police officer for various local municipalities over the last 20 years, including Saxonburg, Evans City, Adams Township, Parker City, as well as the officer in charge of Mars Police for several years. Serving as second vice president of the Pennsylvania Prison Wardens Association, I thought we were, member of the Pennsylvania County Corrections Associations, vice president of the Butler County Chiefs of Police Association, and a previous member of the American Correctional association in which Beau successfully completed the Certified Correctional Execution, so a CCE program. I'm going to ask you about that, actually. Beau is also a lifelong resident of Butler County, graduating from Knox High School in 1995. Very impressive. So nice to say here with you. Hey, I know you guys are both going to be really humble, so that's a very impressive. And I have Matt to my left here. So Matt is our reentry coordinator here at the Butler County Prison, a position he has been in for 5 years now. But you worked in the prison for, did you say?
Since 2012.
Since 2012, okay. And Matt is a graduate of Slippery Rock University with a BA in criminology. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you both for taking the time to discuss your roles in the prison, where support is needed, what's working, and what your day-to-days are. So I really want to start with you both sharing a little bit more about your background and why you do what you do. So Beau, we will start with you first.
Well, I don't think anybody ends up in corrections on purpose necessarily, but I was working in a printing press where I'm taking some college classes, and a family friend of mine, Lenny Gamble, kind of recruited me into it. And I just kind of enjoyed the work. I like being around people and hearing their stories, and the work was exciting and unpredictable, so it was kind of fun.
Good.
Yeah, that's to piggyback on that. I don't think anybody, plans on being in corrections. I was working at a juvenile placement facility out of college, and we just had some friends that worked at the prison and said, we do something similar for more money, and something that's just easier to take care of a family, and so I went, and like Beau said, it's exciting, and you never know what your day's gonna be like, so you never have the same day twice.
Yeah, that is exciting. I like that. So there's a lot that we want to talk about today. I just want you gentlemen to make sure that you are sharing everything that you'd like to share about what you do, and the people that you work with, what they are doing for our community. So first, because of our topic that we're talking about this season with addiction, the drug problem, what's going on. I don't know how we can really get into that. I mean, there's a problem, but we have a lot of resources here. I do know that other than fentanyl, which is one of the biggest issues, correct? We also have xylazine, and word on the street is there might be something else that's kind of popping up now. I don't know if that's correct information or not, or if you can even speak on that. But yeah, what would you like to say about the drug problem here in Butler?
I mean, I could talk about the trends we've seen over the years. It's affected the community the same way, I'd say. Crack cocaine in the 90s when I started. We moved into heroin and ultimately fentanyl, but there's other substances that have never really gone away. There's just been new substances added to the market. But it affects people the same way, and it ruins lives the same way, I think. So really kind of irrelevant what substance we're talking about.
Yeah, and that's something too, like with reentry, right? That you'll notice people who will leave and then you'll see them right back in. And that's something we can get into. A lot of that is maybe the time that they had, or they don't have anywhere to go when they leave. And that's something that I know you work really hard to try to help people, get people set up for success. But then there is an element of them having to take responsibility, right? And showing up.
Right. I mean, it also comes down to, here's the tools, use them or don't. Because nobody can stay with you every day and be by your shoulder to shoulder and say, no, you're supposed to do this, and you're supposed to do this. At some point, you have all the resources set up that we can give you. You have to then take the next step.
Mm-hmm. So Beau, how you approach someone, the resources given to your corrections officer I can't speak. I'm going to say that again. Let's do that again.
Okay.
Beau, how you approach someone and the resources given to your corrections officers to handle these encounters. We talked about that briefly.
Well, there's a lot of different things we can do. We do a lot of different trainings. A lot of our staff has taken the CIT training, that crisis intervention training, week-long program that actually, I think there's a grant that covers it. We get money for our people to go, so it's a great program. But it honestly, in my opinion, it's hard to really replace experience. The longer somebody works as a corrections officer, the more comfortable they get that talking to people, developing rapport, and I think that's what really helps our people the most, probably.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think the biggest thing, like he hit on, is the being able to talk to people. Social. You have to be sociable. You have to be able to, you can't have the inability to be in a conversation. And if you're thrown back or it's not a conversation you're comfortable with, they're gonna, whoever you're talking to is gonna notice that.
Even
So you have to first and foremost have that ability to be sociable. But the CIT training was awesome because I know that this is a lot of this is central to drug and alcohol and substance abuse. But and I saw throughout the years that the co-occurring movement is coming on, a lot of the state hospitals are closed now. So the CIT training comes into effect with police outside because now they're recognizing and identifying mental health. Maybe not the first answer is not to bring them to jail right away, because essentially sometimes when the state mental hospitals close, their jails become they're on deck. They're next. So that's the biggest thing is just how you recognize and socialize with people of different backgrounds and have different issues at that time.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the next point really is you get a lot of mental patients. You get a lot of terminally ill patients, and that can affect your budget and your spending, like unforeseen costs, right? And I don't think the public understands that when we're talking about budgeting and, at the beginning of whatever the fiscal year is, right? When you are given your budget and then they look at spending, explain that so people can understand these are things you're not prepared for. You have to cover them as they come.
Wow, that's a good point. I mean, the budgeting, some of these medications that people can come in on or need when they're there. I've seen medications that are $40,000 a month or more. So it's really hard to predict the needs that people are going to have when you're laying out a budget for a year that hasn't happened yet. At least that part of the budget. So that was a kind of a learning curve for me, doing the budget for this year, which was the first one that I ever did. And we've had some really sick people. We've had some really sick people that have addiction problems on top of that and mental health problems on top of that. So we're not looking, I think sometimes people look at it like, you got a mental health person or you've got someone with a medical problem. Sometimes they have 3 or 4 different problems. You don't have a lot of time to really get them to where they need to be sometimes. So it can be a challenge.
Yeah. So we're talking about housing, and we discussed this the other day about you do have an apartment that is part of that budget that you're able to provide for someone when they're first coming out to get set up. But you have one. And in a perfect world, you'd have how many? 300?
That would be nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. Anybody out there make that happen for the warden and our reentry coordinator? That would be amazing. Just send me an email. Let me know. So CCR housing, I have that on there. I literally wrote that down and then I put it in these notes.
Well, that would be, Matt has a lot more information on that.
So we do have some housing programs throughout the county. I mean, we have Catholic Charities, we have the Center for Community Resources, we have which is a SOAR program. We have different programs, but a lot of them have a lot of criteria that you have to meet, and sometimes they don't meet all the boxes. They don't check all the boxes sometimes, and so in the event that happens, we have the interim, the North Street interim, which is ran through the Center for Community Resources. It's an 8-bed facility designed for up to 30 days of the stay, and through that they will receive a housing case manager who help them with the next step. But then you're always coming back to are they going to sit there for 30 days and not look for a job, not look for a housing? No, they may. Or you may have somebody that's like, listen, I'm going to drop my stuff off. I'm out the door to go find a job. You have those as well. And then that's the beautiful thing. That's what keeps everybody going, where you have, whether it's compassion fatigue that sets in or you're burnt out. It's those cases where, this program was designed for something like this. This is what it's designed for. We're going to have X amount of people who are going to take advantage of the programs or do something like that. But, housing is our number one struggle because with the reintegration program, the reentry program, you are not able to find employment until you know where they're living. Because if they don't have transportation, it's got to be close to where they're living. And the problem is if you don't know a definitive date that they're being released, no landlord's going to be like, yeah, we'll hold it for the next 40, 45 days.
Yeah, no.
Me not getting income, so you have to almost, it's a panic time right at the end. And that's why we have so many supports and resources that we can try to get them, because it's, you sometimes try to get 1, 2, or 3, even 3 different release plans, depending on how are we going to react if this happens, if the release date's this, if the release date's that. Now, if they have a hearing and they say, hey, March 25th is your release date, that's perfect. We know exactly what we're able to do. Then now you throw into the mix that they have the right to early parole. If they put in for that. A lot of times, some of our inmates don't look at the big picture. They're like, hey, I just want to get out of jail. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that makes sense to me, but what are you getting out to? Because we don't have this set up yet. So now if you get early parole granted, here's the thing, where are you going?
Where are you going? What are you doing?
Correct. So there's a lot of dynamics in that, and there's nothing that I think, there's no easy answer to that.
Yeah. Are you allowed to talk about the criteria? Are you allowed to talk about that at all? Like what?
The criteria for housing?
Like for CCR housing. And then if you move beyond that, if they don't meet that criteria, moving on from that, but the criteria for them to get into that type of housing.
So there's some programs where you have to be referred through a specific, a drug and alcohol provider. There's some programs have the criteria of you can only make X amount of money. We ran into some issues not long ago where a program was informing one of our clients that he did not make enough money for the program. And your first response is, well, him not making enough money is why he's in the program. So yes. I'm not sure what,
that should be a reason for him to get in.
Right? Yeah, correct. That's the whole point. So, and the thing is, a lot of these companies and a lot of these programs are grant based. So it's not like they're making the boxes.
Absolutely.
The grant itself may have the boxes. One of the biggest things too is that it comes back to the individual too. It's like, hey, we can get you X, Y, and Z. We can get you this amount. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to live at this place. It's like, well, you have nowhere near the amount of money for that. I understand that you would like to live there. How about that be the goal? And let's get a job in here, and then we work on financial literacy. We work on things like that to get you into that. And a lot of times people, there are some people that aren't willing to do that, and they go back to the I quit mode. And that's why through the classes at the prison, we try to do a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy classes where you have to change your way of thinking if you want to change your situation.
Yes. And finding a job in those situations is hard enough as it is, because there's a lot of employers who liability was something I discussed briefly with Mike Kelly. I've discussed it with Tammy because I wanted to understand it. Like how is an employer liable for someone if they hire them and then they go off and get a DUI or something happens at work? I can understand that. Right now, it's as I'm saying it out loud. And as I was talking to Tammy, it started to make sense. I'm like, yes, if someone comes in here and they're under substances and they're working in the press room and they get hurt,
right,
she's liable. It's the same as when I was a bartender in Manhattan. We had to take a test. And if I overserved someone and they walked out of the establishment and walked out in front of a car and got hit by a car and they were killed, I could go to jail because I served them the alcohol. Right. So when you're explaining it that way to people, but it's hard for people to find jobs when they have records. So that's something that we sort of have started talking about as well. The correction system has changed. Beau, do either one of you or do both of you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I could talk about that. When I started in the 90s, we didn't have any of this. Mm-hmm. We had almost no programming. We had a couple of our own in-house counselors. We didn't really have a reentry program. We had a work release program, but you just got sentenced to work release and you went to work and came back. So to be where we're at now, it's kind of like mind-blowing, really. If you think about all the classes that we teach and the different organizations we're working with, it's been crazy. Like if you went back and told me in the 90s that this is what corrections would look like now, I would have thought you were crazy. So we're providing services. We're trying to change people's lives where before we were just detaining them, holding them because they were either waiting for a court hearing or they were sentenced, whatever the case may be. I don't know if there's a way to really measure the impact that we've had, but there's a lot of people over this couple of decades that have put a lot of work and time into changing the way that we think, because we realize, I think, that is the job of a corrections officer. And we have a lot of them, and they do a really good job dealing with some really complex cases, and it's old hat to them. And we have a pretty young staff on board now. We had a lot of turnover the last couple of years, so it's exciting to see these new people come on board and learning from the older people, and how they're able to interact with people that have mental health problems, addiction problems. It's exciting. So I think that is the biggest change in how corrections officers' job has evolved.
Absolutely, because before you were doing a job, right? And I am not a corrections officer, so I don't know what the day-to-day ins and outs are. Just imagine in my brain, I'm like, people come in, you put them in the jail cell, you see somebody sitting at a desk writing papers, and, in the movies, you see things like that. You don't really see all of this. And I think it's really remarkable to see how much we have evolved. But you hit a point that I wanted to say right after, but you hit it, is that we've changed our mindset and how we're approaching people with stigma, right? Because back in the day, it was, just throw them in jail. That's what they need. They just need to go to jail. And then when they get out, they need to get it together. They need to get a job and find a place to live. And that's just not how it works, because we're talking about the body. We're talking about the brain, which is a really intricate, very ancient part of our brain that ends up getting sort of tapped into when we're using these illicit substances. So kudos to all of you for doing that. And, your people, I don't know if you call them your people. I feel like they're your people, but they should be really proud of the work they're putting in. I did go to the government center. I only got to go the first week of the Hocus Dope training, which is not, that's one teeny tiny little thing. It's nothing compared to the trainings that your officers are going through. But just seeing how full this room was with these corrections officers. I mean, I came in and sat down, and the guy next to me, he had like a gun in a holster. I was like, oh, there's staff guns. And now I'm just like sitting here, and I'm like, they're like official, and I'm just a podcaster at the Butler Eagle. But it's really amazing to see those programs. So I love seeing that. We did talk a little bit about that gap, right, between meeting a person in crisis to the time they enter jail. And then you also feel that there's a gap after jail. There's only so much you can do. Like you said, Matt, you give them the resources, right? You line as much up as you can for them, but no one's going to be able to follow them around. They don't have a shadow. So let's say Beau and then Matt, do you both want to kind of discuss that?
Yeah, I could talk a little bit about that. And I've run into it when I was a police officer. You kind of get to that point where you encounter somebody. Butler County is kind of a unique county where we're not really big enough to have all of the resources that bigger counties have, but we're kind of getting to the point where we may need them. So it's almost like a transitional phase in our history. So there may be instances where you encounter somebody on the street and you're left with really no choice but to charge them and put them in jail, which sometimes it sounds bad, but it may be a good, safe place to kind of hit the reset button, get them synced up with some resources that we have, and that we can get them lined up with resources on the outside. But this is probably a good point to mention Rich Goldhager, the DA, his Letty program.
Yes.
And this is something I think that is designed specifically for this gap that we're talking about. And I'm not trying to, get on his good side, but I,
it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt. He's on the prison board, but he does a lot. And I think he's a person that you can kind of look at to see how he understands the trends that are happening in the community. And rather than necessarily having to lock people up, the DA is looking at different ways to provide these services and catch people before they come to us. And this program, I think, is really going to change a police officer's role, a corrections role, because it just gives that police officer on the street at 2:30 in the morning another tool in his belt to help somebody. And the program's set up where it's actually super easy. It's not all complex. There's not tons of red tape. So an officer can immediately sync somebody up with these resources like live time. So this is probably the best thing that's ever happened to bridge that gap, in my opinion.
Well, it's a value to this community, taking on this role. Something that I think we need to talk about, just break it up here for a minute, is how do you both take care of yourselves?
Mentally?
Yeah, well, mentally and physically. And the physical side will affect the mental. I'm a huge advocate of those endorphins.
I think really, and this is easier said than done, and you can talk to probably the better question for any corrections officer that's working right now. That's an intense, constant pressure kind of job. But I think it's important to have something outside, something that doesn't cause you stress, whether it's some kind of a hobby or a gym or something that you do for yourself that's completely separate from this line of work, because it weighs on you. I mean,
I like to golf, right? So that's what I do.
Okay.
And I also pick shifts up at the crisis hotline.
That doesn't count.
Yeah, but that doesn't count. Yes, I agree. That does not count. Thank you for that. But
golf. It's tough in the winter months too. It's like, the days are shorter. You get home and it's getting dark as you're pulling in the driveway. It's, so, and then families come into play, and it's just like, well, I have to do X, Y, and Z. I know sometimes I get to the point where like my kids go to bed and I start looking at the clock and my wife, I'm like, is it too early for us? Like, am I allowed to go to bed now? Or,
of course.
It's like you haven't had your wind down time yet either. So you definitely have to have something. Like my big one's golf. Like I go on, my wife will tell you it's more, but I go on a few golf trips throughout the summer. And, that does recharge your batteries. Like it's, like we have a lot of people at work that take like 1 or 2 days off this week. Not me. I take a full week and I'm just like recharge and come back.
Okay. Yes. That's important. Are you a golfer?
Not a golfer.
No, not a golfer. What's your sport of choice?
Well, I like motorcycles and cars. That's kind of on the outside.
Yeah.
So just kind of get into that in the evening and on the weekends. It's kind of nice to take your mind off of things, and it's a good way to kind of escape and get away. But
your role as reentry coordinator and the program itself, I want you to talk a little bit more about you specifically. Like, what would a day be like for you? I mean, a lot of things are going to come up, right, that you're not expecting, but.
Right. So the main thing, to sum up the reintegration program is, it's a program with, it's designed for county inmates, and it's designed to cut down on recidivism. My ideal client is not a guy who's in jail for his first time for a DUI, has stable housing, a stable house. That that looks great for numbers if you're a numbers guy, because the risk of recidivism is very low. To qualify for the reintegration program, you have to be sentenced to at least 4 months left in jail. You have to be a high risk for recidivism, and then obviously county of Butler inmate, because it's just too difficult. We can put an out of county inmate through all the classes, and they have that ability. They can go to any class that that we offer. But for us to get them involved in services for a county, I've never used services in Allegheny County. I don't know what services they offer. I don't know. So, it's too difficult to try to get them a job, a house, and stuff like that. So there are some referrals we can make and set them up with some people who can do that. But this is specifically for the Butler County residents. And what we do is we do a few different risks tools and a few intake screenings, and then we put them through a program full of cognitive behavioral therapy classes. When we have them work in the jail, whether it's kitchen, laundry, cleaning, whatever the duty is, and they're paid, and that helps go towards their fines. So they start paying their fines inside the building. And then in the first two steps of the program are pretty cookie cutter for everybody, and then steps 3 and 4 is where we really look at your specific situations. If you're 40 years old, don't have any kids, don't want any kids, we're not going to make you go through parenting for 12 weeks whenever you have, I have this drug and alcohol substance abuse issue. Well, I'm like, we're going to concentrate more on the substance abuse classes. So we designed a curriculum for them at the end. And the big thing is when I started looking into, okay, what area are we going to live in? Okay, so let's find, do you have a license? No. Well, then maybe living in, Petrolia or West Sunbury is not going to work for you right off the bat, because how are you going to get back in for your probation requirements? How are you going to get back in for if you're going to IOP? How are you going to get back for this and this?
Uh-huh.
So maybe let's try to find some housing around here. And then we look to see, like, why don't you have a license? Is it because you don't have a car? Is it because your license is suspended? Is it because you've never had your license? And then we try to do that. Within the program, they'll also get all their documents, their driver's license. They get right when they first get out, because they'll get a case manager who will take them directly to the DMV. Their social security card, birth certificate, diploma, a copy of that we get while they're in there. So they have all that stuff. And then the big thing is, we work on interviewing skills, resume building. One of the big things is, and I preach to them in our classes, don't lie on your resume.
Yeah.
If you lie on your resume or your interview, you could be the best employee they've had for 6 months, and all of a sudden they find out you've falsified that. They can fire you.
Yep.
And I was like, and most businesses do a background check, so they're going to know. And when you're building your resume, you're going to have that gap where people are going to automatically think, oh, jail, illness, there's a reason you are working. And I also stress them, don't downplay why you were in jail. I don't get into details and say, hey, me and my cousin so-and-so did this on this date. But if you leave it up to people's imaginations, most people, most business owners who have never had an interaction with anybody in jail or never known anybody in jail, you think somebody's in jail and they have tattoos, stuff like that. You're letting them imagine what you were probably in jail for.
Yep.
And a lot of people, you have to think, worst case scenario, they're going to think, murder. They're going to think, arson, rape, aggravated assault, simple assault, when you might have been in there, if you were selling drugs. Okay, well, that you were doing that to support your family. That's an idea people can get behind. Yeah. And you have to own the fact, hey, I messed up. This has happened. Logistically though, I work in logistics. I did that. There are some traits out of doing that, being serviceable to a business owner. And a big thing, and then I kind of fight the battle for them with local businesses, and the point of, there's a lot of businesses, I shouldn't say a lot, there are some businesses in the area that I know that their headquarters or corporate gets a discount because they say they hire felons. Okay. But that doesn't mean that the local business themselves hires felons. That doesn't mean that if I call and say, hey, this is Matt Clayton from the jail, I have somebody coming out, I'd like to see if you want to have any interest in interviewing them, just trying to meet them. Because we've had a lot of companies that'll come right into the jail, and we'll sit right in the center right there, and I'll set a table up. They can have a conversation. Mm-hmm. But there's some companies that as soon as I say from the jail, they're like, no. And I'm like, I'll say to them, like, but your company gets they're on the higher felons list. And they kind of back that on. It's just like, so just because the corporate says they do, doesn't mean that the corporate knows that the general manager or a hiring manager on a 3 to 11 shift at this little mom and pop, we'll say like a pizza shop or like a chain place. That doesn't mean they know they're not coming in and interview them. And I just, we make them ready for, that's also a reality of it. You have, what's happened's already happened. You need to now embrace it and step up from here. So that's just some of the things.
So And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but what is the incentive? Like if they, can you talk about that? Like, do they get is it a monetary incentive?
I know that there's a lot of tax breaks that are given, but there's also, I know, and I'd have to look at this, this was a few years ago. I saw there's a bond that used to be given by the state. That's like almost like a little insurance policy. If you hire somebody, with a background, I'm sure there's certain boxes that you need to check to get it.
Okay.
And then that person ends up doing something, causes damage, has a small theft or something like that. The bond will reimburse that. I'm just not sure the process of how that business would go about that.
And it could be different for different businesses, right? Is kind of what you're saying. So, because I guess that's interesting. That's what I'm trying to dig into, is this whole liability thing. To understand that more. I can understand where you don't want to have to worry every single day when you come into work and think, okay, is this person going to come in today? Are they going to be high today? Or are they going to fall into the press while it's running? And some, obviously that's a natural human when you care. I absolutely agree with that. And if you are held liable for that, yeah, that's a big deal, because you're trying to give someone an opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to me, it's like that. I feel like maybe that's still a bit of a gap, even though there are these incentives, but I feel like there's still a little bit of a gap there when it comes to that. So I don't know. I'm just trying to get as much information as I can. I feel like my brain I have so much information in my head in the last 3 months of all of these conversations. I'm just like, what? So time frame can be different, right? For someone who's reentering society, and control over that. I mean, you've even said before that someone will find out, or you'll find out someone's getting out. Talk about that just a little bit more, maybe like different situations of people reentering. Typically, it can happen really quickly, right? You can only get so much lined up for them in that amount of time.
Yeah, well, I mean, so like we had said earlier in our conversations, was the average stay is around 30 to 34 days for a county inmate. That takes into account your people that brought in for a bench warrant. Are there right away. They see the judge the next day, they set up a payment plan or a new court date, and they get released. And that also counts the people that are there for 2 years fighting their case, or a year and a half fighting their case. And then maybe they go through their case and they're like, the judge is like, hey, you've been in jail for 16 months, time served, so you have to rely a lot on self-admit from the inmate. Mm-hmm. The problem comes into then is, the inmates have a lot of hopeful thinking. And if they're an optimist, they think I'm getting out tomorrow. Right. So it's like, if you don't know that for sure, though, what can you got a game plan, like, hey, this is what we'll do. So a lot of the reentry stuff necessarily isn't. It's easier to do when they get out, if you have the availability to do that. Okay. Where we run into the problem is once they get out, they're not an inmate. So they don't have to. They can choose as like be in the wind, or they can go. Whatever they want to do. We're there. They know where our building's at. They know where our office is at. They know, they know how to get a hold of us. But they, how many people are going to want to, spend this much time in prison and not go straight to, hey, I want to go see my family. I want to go see my friends. I want to go do this. I was just, whatever you do for your own time, you want to get back to doing that. And sometimes that's when you hope the decision making got enough. Like, hey, I have a lot of time for that, but let me make sure that my criminal, they're called the criminogenic needs are taken care of, which is like shelter, employment, transportation, family engagement, stuff like that. So, wow. But it does make it difficult.
Yeah, and you said a lot of that too can deal with someone's insurance getting what's the word I'm looking for?
Reactivated.
Activated. Yep. Thank you. Reactivated. Because that's a huge one, especially if you have someone that was relying on medication when they're in there. So we got to make sure that, because the minute they go into jail, right, the insurance is cut off.
Yeah. Yes? Mostly. I mean, mostly. It's, it depends how long they're in there for. And there's, and that's, we rely heavily on our case managers through other providers for that, mainly like Glade Run, because you cannot, and a lot of times we cannot get their insurance turned on until they're outside the jail.
Yes, I remember you said that.
And if they're on MAT, then medication assisted treatment, they need a dose that day. Maybe they need a dose tomorrow. Like you need their insurance on pronto.
Yeah,
because it might come down to maybe some providers won't listen to. Maybe they'll be like, well, we would schedule them, but they have no insurance. Well, then you're like, yeah, I know, because then they get out tomorrow. Well, the insurance won't turn on until they're out.
Why is it that the insurance turns off when they're in jail?
I couldn't tell you, and I've been asking the question. It's just, it's just not something that we have found a streamline to yet. And I think a lot of it, and this is my theory, would come down to, we don't know the exact release date yet. I think if we were able to say, hey, inmate Jones gets out on March 26th, maybe they could then say, without a doubt, getting out 26th, it was like, okay, it'll be on the 26th. Maybe, I don't know, but there's not very many times where I can say, yes, they're without a doubt getting out on this date.
And that decision comes obviously directly from the insurance companies.
Or the assistant's office, the insurance companies, whatever situation they're in.
Yeah. Okay. Well, sorry. I feel like I'm just trying to figure so much stuff out. I feel like I'm over here with a shovel. I'm like,
well, there's so many different challenges. It's right. And that comes back down to the time. Like if you think about, if you take our local population, that'd be 34 days. It's like a couple of weeks. Right.
So before you know it, it's done, right?
Yeah, sometimes.
Well, the bad part about that 34 days is it's just that, if you take whatever your situation is now, how can you do with 34 days without a paycheck? It's enough time to maybe in some instances do some damage to your situation, but it's not enough time in a lot of cases to get a lot of things set up. So that's where we get back, and then you were talking about how our brains are and how humans are creatures of habit, and when we get out of jail, no matter how high your motivation is, you don't know how you're going to react when you get that stressor of, I have no money, I have no job. And the longer you don't have a job is the longer we know is going to be 2 weeks from that minimum until I get a paycheck. So if it takes you 2 weeks to get a job outside of jail, you're looking at, almost well over a month before you get a paycheck, on top of the however long you were in jail not getting a paycheck. Your life can change drastically. So, but our brains do know where our comfort level was before we went into jail. We know what we did for money before we went in there. It's kind of like take the addiction out of it. If, I worked at the prison for 10 years and I went and tried something else and it didn't work out, I know that I can go back to the prison because that's how I made money, right? It's not a fair concept for us to get behind or to understand their thought process of, I need money and I need it now. I know how I used to make money. Even if they get convinced themselves it's going to be a one-time deal just to give myself that stock, it's not going to happen just a one-time deal. It's very rarely going to be the way it's going to happen.
Yeah. What do we do? Fundraisers. Do you have fundraisers? Is that something that you ever are able to do?
Not something we can really do.
Yeah. Is it because you're not able to because you do get grant money? Or just because you don't have the resources to put stuff like that together?
I just think we couldn't do it. And I wouldn't even know where to start something like that. But
I know where to start.
Do you?
Oh yeah, I'm a huge
fundraiser.
Yeah, well, it was only $25,000, but in 2015, I raised money for Butler County Habitat for Humanity. I rode my bike cross country.
Oh wow! Cool.
So I went from California to New York on my bicycle, not motorcycle. Because someone once was like, "Oh, I rode a motorcycle cross country." My brother was like, "No, bicycle." He's like, "She pedaled." And not that it has to be something extravagant, but I am definitely the type of person that's like, well, what would make sense? What type of fundraiser would make sense? And like that could bring in, maybe it is 25,000 or maybe it is, everyone talked about $5 Fridays, starting something like that in a year, how much money could that be? You just don't know, right?
Don't know how much you need either. So you really start.
Exactly.
Yeah, something like
that.
Can be part of the problem.
Yeah, of course.
The beautiful thing about that is, and obviously this would have to go to people way above me in the county. You'd see the legal part of it. What could we do? What type of situation? But you create something like this, and it kind of feeds itself. With the particular apartment that we are discussing, it's first month free. Second month is $165. Third month, $165 again. And then the fourth and final month is $330, and that's everything. But what you're doing is you're feeding money back into that pot.
Yes.
So it does feed itself to a point. So it's yes, we have a lot of startup money, or a lot of startup things to do that we need some money for. But like I said, we have the apartment through through NDC. And they're amazing to work with. CCR has been amazing. NDC has been amazing. I met with Chris Lund and this is a couple years ago, and this has been something that was in my brain. I was just like, I would love to do this. And the administration, the president's like, hey, yeah, like you go see what we need to do, go see what needs to, and I kind of started, asking different people throughout the county. I spoke to Amanda Feldenberger. She's been instrumental in it through the county, and and where we got to was it's good. We got this apartment. I fully furnished it, and now it's okay. Now it's down to we categorize everything that's in there. We document it. It's like you're going to be responsible for things you break. You're going to be responsible for anything like that. But other than that, now all the money I need for this first year, because all the rent's paid, is cleaning fees. Something, anything needs replaced, stuff like that. So once you get it up and going, there's a little less cost to keep it going. But I mean, we're new with the data now. Like I said, the individual that's in there now in the apartment is coming up her 4th and final month here in a few days. It'll start that 4th month. She's doing, better than I have ever seen her do. I've known her for, years. And like I told you earlier, I've never seen her outside the prison. So she was high risk for recidivism, and she is doing amazing. But what that apartment did was it took that, she has a lot of stressors going on. Housing isn't one of them. That's monumental to recovery, because that's your biggest obstacle right there is I need a roof over my head. So there are some frustrations that come with it, but it's far better than what the alternative is. I know that we've discussed, like, it would be awesome to have a building that's like an offset of the jail. Like, it's like, here's the reentry program. It's like you're in the main part of the jail for X amount of time, and then you transition into another staffed building that you have strict schedules, you have strict you come and go. That's reentering in society. That's reentry at its finest. It's not because there are a lot of people out there that think the jail is still, hey, I'm going to be in jail for 6 months. I'm going to sit here and play pinochle and cards and handball, and then I'm going to get out in 6 months. And you can do that if the inmate chooses to do that. If the inmate says, I don't want classes, nobody's going to force you to go. But that's just not what corrections is anymore. And it doesn't help the county to do that either, because the county is eventually going to get cost with recidivism, because the county does, so even if you're looking at it from a beans, counting beans, angle, it's like, this is saving money. This is, $70 a day, right? Or itch for it to house an inmate. Well, I assume too, with inflation, I assume, it's
inflation.
Yeah. So, so that's what it was when I first started. So, whatever it is now, I was like, well, how about we start getting them, paying on their fines and working and doing all this to help offset some of this. It's just, it's a pipe dream at this point. But it would be amazing.
If you could add 3 more in this year,
it would be amazing.
If you were just like, okay, this is how much the rent would be for 3 more apartments. This is the total rent, utilities, essentially, right? And you're like, off the top, this is this, and then let's add a percentage on top of that of maybe other things that might pop up. If you did that, send me the number.
It would be awesome.
Because it's something, right? That's an opportunity. Like you said, you've never seen her outside of the jail.
Right.
And she's coming up on her 4th month.
Working 6 days a week, all of her appointments, all of her treatment appointments, and she has the everyday struggles of what we all have. Like she's tired, she may sleep through an alarm. She may, that's what she's worried about now, is this like, oh man, I needed to be here. I slept through my alarm because I've been working.
Feeling
right. It is.
Isn't it?
We can all relate to that stress and anxiety.
Oh yeah.
And that's not what what we deal with. We just had a family group decision making with her last week, and just to see her family, who most people go into jail, they're estranged from the family for whatever they did prior to, or they're saying, hey, so-and-so's back in jail. What a shock, this and that. And just to see, her react to the nice things of like the family saying like, hey, you're really, you're showing us something different. You're this and that. I think it's all beneficial in the grand scheme of things, but, the big thing is people need to understand and the resources that go into that there is a lot. I took Beau one time. So when I was trying to set up the program, I took him, we went to a local bank just to talk about, hey, I want to start setting my inmates or my participants up with a bank account. And they're like, yeah, you just go over to bank. I was like, these are not your I don't want them to have a typical bank account. I want to see if we can work on something, A, that we can open before they get out of the jail. B, sometimes, you'll find a bank that'll give you like, hey, like a type of account where you can't overdraw it because, financial literacy is still a new concept to a lot of these participants. It's like, they just like, oh man, look, every time I swipe this card, like I get something for it. It's just like, yeah, well, it's coming out of something. Like,
there's got to be something in there to,
Yeah. So we met with the bank and he, and Beau, and I was so grateful that he came and saw that because that was like an hour, 15, 20 minutes of my day. And then we didn't get an agreement or anything like that, but it's like, that's the rocks you're turning over to try to get that, say, once this program's up and running, maybe we connect with a bank and say, hey, you're our go-to bank for our participants, but you have to go meet with banks to see who that bank's going to be. So inevitably, we didn't choose we still, any banks out there, we still haven't got anybody, but
we're looking for a bank.
You're right.
To work with the prison. Come on.
Yeah. And here's the big thing too. And we learned that day was, the banks talk to each other, so if you owe this bank, and I guess Common Sense should have told me that, but I've never been in that position, but if you owe $300 to this bank's not going to open you up.
Yeah.
So, that's tough then because then it's like, you do get your inmate job, you get them out and then it's like, hey, I need $300 to give to them just so you could open up a bank. Now you're out of money that you made. In your mind, you're like, I didn't get anything out of that, even though it's like you got what you need is
you're set up.
You spent $300. That's why you owe that money. You owe it. So it's tough to wrap your head around that. And then on top of that, they have to pay their fines. That's something too. You're not going to leave the jail in my program without knowing to the dime what fines you owe, because you'll go back to jail for not paying your fines. Like it's a probation violation. It's earns out for you.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's kind of like I always equate it to, we all have a car payment. What frustrates you more when you have a car payment is when you have to go get your car fixed. It's like, I already paid monthly for this car. And now I'm paying more for this. So they have to understand what you're paying for with that fine is you're out of jail.
Mm-hmm.
It's your agreement that, so that is a probation requirement. When you don't meet that, you do come back into jail.
Yes. I was going to ask you about the family group decision, explaining that a little bit more to anyone who's listening, what that is.
So it's ran through the Center for Community Resources. And essentially what you do is we meet in the conference room at Center for Community Resources, and the family sits down, the individual sits down, and then all the supports sit down. So it's the probation officer, the case manager, myself, any other case managers, departments or programs that are part of. And we talk about, okay, so, inmate so-and-so, well, at this point, we do it after they're out of jail. So participant so-and-so, what do you need from your family and supports? What do you want to see from us to help you succeed? And they go through it. We make that, they type it up, they put it on a projection screen. And then the family gives their part, like, hey, this is what we're expecting of you. This is what's happened in the past. Like, and it's not all negative. It's like, hey, I've seen these strengths. I know this is a strength of yours. Let's remind you that you're doing awesome. It's tough to get some, some affirmations and not all negative. And then the Center for Community Resources will, in the middle of it, they'll provide a meal. So the family kind of eats together and the supports eat and it takes a break. And then we all go out of the room, all the supports and the professionals will go out of the room, and the family will hash together like a plan for every barrier that we discussed. Then when we come back in, they'll go over, okay, it's cousin so-and-so, it's their job to make sure that the participant does this. It's mom and dad's job that they go to the IOP meetings. And then what we do is we'll meet 3 months after that and say, okay, because they'll send a plan out to everybody and we'll meet in 3 months, say, how's the plan going? Because if she's not meeting that, one of the professionals will know. The probation officer will know, the case manager will know he or she is not getting their appointments. Just yesterday, I was just out in the community doing a training for people to come in and provide services in the jail. And I just happened to be walking down the hallway, and one of my participants' case manager was there, and hey, Clayton just walked by, actually. He pulled the phone down and said, hey, so-and-so missed their appointments. All right, well, let's go find out why. So when I found out why, they slept through it. So it's just like, hey, this is your time. Like, you're an adult, you can do what you want, but you can't keep sleeping through appointments. The most overwhelming thing that they find is they work all these hours because they need the money.
Mm-hmm.
But then everything they have scheduled has to be on their days off. And it's tough for them to then, like, I work 6 days a week, I have 1 day off, I kind of want to relax. Like, well, you can't, because you have to
can't write
all this.
Yeah,
you can't. You're going to get there.
yes,
But right now is the hotbed of recidivism. Right now it's like, it's easy to go back to jail once the sooner you get out of jail, the easier it is. There's that hot period of my motivation's high not to go back. And then when that complacency sets in, that's when the hotbed of you're going to go, you could go back.
yes.
This is what it's going to be, but then the longer you stay out and you make this structured environment and you make this routine, then all of a sudden you start to get past that again. It goes to, now I have more of a chance of staying out.
Of course, there's that like hurdle they need to get over and understand that you always go through that, right? We go through that.
Mm-hmm.
I still go through periods like that where I'm like, I don't know when I had a day off. I love that you have that as well, the family group decision. There's a few more other things, and we want to kind of wrap it up. We're coming up on an hour here, gentlemen. Is there anything else? Like, you say co-occurring a lot, and I understand what that means, but I don't know. I kind of do want to maybe just in this instance, like in the jail, co-occurring, when you say that, what do you mean?
So co-occurring, in our sense, and the definition is what we see is they're struggling with mental health and substance abuse at the same time. And there's a bunch of different theories out there. How do you deal with this? How do you deal with that? My personal theory, and I'm not quoting anybody, so if you disagree, sorry, we're allowed to disagree.
No,
is
absolutely.
How can you treat your mental health until you're at your baseline of your mental health, right? And to do that, you have to be in control of your substance abuse to get you to the baseline. And then once that baseline is determined and recognized, then let's treat the mental health. But right now, I mean, it's just a lot of people, a lot of people on our radars in our building, they're used to treating their mental health with substances. They mask it with the substance.
Yes. They're self-diagnosing.
Correct. And that just becomes another hurdle. It's not something that can't be treated. It's not something that can't be, but it's just going to take a little longer. I think we all know that in today's society, we're in impulse control. We want instant gratification, and you're not going to have that. There's going to be steps, and it's the same thing with these programs we're talking about. I know the one thing is, there's a lot of people that define success for reintegration as, do they come back to jail? So sometimes, what if we have somebody in our program that's back to jail 8 times a year, and then the next 2-3 years they're back twice? I think that is a success.
Yes.
You could put, and we all need numbers, statistics, and stuff like that, and they can have them. They can use. I'll give them 2 years if they are.
But they're coming back.
Correct. Right.
If they're not getting charged again,
right,
and they're sober still, they're clean, and they just can pay their fine.
Right.
Yeah, which you had mentioned that, and that's an unfortunate situation, especially with inflation right now. I mean, it's tough out there.
Yeah, there's people that can't make their cable bill, and you're not taking them to jail. It's like, listen, my fine payment was this, so I had to pay this, and that's unfortunately what, my heat doesn't get turned off if I don't pay my fine. But I see the flip side of it is what's good. If you just say, hey, you need to start paying your fines, and that's all you get, people are not going to pay their fines, right? Which is an obligation.
But for someone who already owes, it's like they already owe all of this, and then we're just going to keep adding more onto it.
Right. Well,
and they're trying to catch up.
Correct. And the thing about it is, and the probation officers that I deal with, they're looking for effort. Your payment plan might be this, but as long as you're showing an effort, they generally work with you.
Yes.
You know, I work with Bethany Hart, and I've seen her have the conversation multiple times that you're showing an effort. We're good. You know, obviously she goes with, let's try to get our payment. You know, here is your payment. Let's try to get to that. You know, and if you know, but if you're showing an effort, I mean the you know. A quote I heard a long time ago was, if we don't give them a second chance, then they're done with chances. And that's as a community, that's as a society community. If we don't give them a second chance, then they have no more chances. So if you keep throwing them in jail, because what are you doing? Now they're not going to be able to pay their fines because they probably just lost whatever job they did have.
And they're just and then those are they're stacking up higher because they don't,
Right.
Yeah, vicious circle.
Like I said, I don't know what the answer is. If I did,
I think having conversations, right? Talking about it, brainstorming, and maybe someone will hear this and have an idea. Just that's how ideas start. You never know who's going to hear this and say, actually, that's an interesting question I had too, just to kind of start to wrap things up is, you had mentioned other counties. Do you ever have, do you get inmates who are and this is an ignorant question because I don't know. I've never been to jail, but I'm going to knock on wood here because I feel like I'm going to jinx myself. Gentlemen, I'm knocking on all the things. Do you get inmates from other counties? You had mentioned something about like Allegheny County. So then when they're reintegrated into society, it's then not on you. Is it on the county that they're from or how?
Well, it's ultimately they can freely choose to live wherever they want. When we get people from other counties, it's a lot of times you see inmates with charges out of not every county, different counties.
Yeah.
So they might be here for this charge here, but they also have court pending down in Allegheny or Westmoreland. So that makes it's tough for me to put them into the program. If they still have 2 open charges in Westmoreland, I have to see what the outcome of those are going to be before we can proceed. So ultimately, if you have open charges somewhere else, you're not going to be eligible for the ReEntry program until those are taken care of. Now, I have called down there and try to get a hold of somebody either in their DA's office or their public defender or their lawyer and say, hey, like, can you give me kind of like what your best, understanding of that situation is? So we may start them in classes and be like, hey, 1 and 2, since they're cookie cutter, like you're going to take all these classes. But if we get 3 and 4, the later phases of the program, and you still don't have these dispositions of these charges, I can't do anything with you until, we can put any game plan you want together, but until we know, we can't solidify one. But it's just tough. I mean, we have contacts in other counties. Glade Run, who's our case management, they have other offices in different counties. So sometimes CCR is almost all over the state.
Okay.
That somebody's going to know somebody. You just have to reach out and like, hey, do you know this person's from, this county? Do we know of any resources I connect them with? Because they're going back there. But ultimately, the later stages of the game too, when they're out, that's all probation. So probation will know, hey, I know that I have so-and-so. I transferred them to this county for their probation. So that PO is then going to be in charge of kind of saying, hey, this is what you need. Let's make sure we're doing it.
Okay. Well, this is all really wonderful information, and it's great hearing from you in person. I know you both were really excited to be on camera today, so thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share or say?
Really, thanks for the opportunity. Maybe someone will hear this and, make some change.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get some. My brain constantly has about 100 tabs open at any given time of ideas. I'm obviously a creative person. So when someone starts talking about a problem, I'm like, there's a solution. And I start thinking. So it was really, first of all, wonderful to meet you both, taking time out of your day, which I know is very busy and important. So thank you for sitting down with me again. I've got, if you can see, you'll be able to see them in the video. To my left, we have Matt Clayton, our reentry coordinator, and to my right, we have Beau Sneddon, our warden. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for tuning in to Alter Eagle. Join me every Monday for a new episode. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode, and follow us on Instagram at Alter Eagle Podcast. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, stay kind.